Actually, I feel that a star owes it to her public to bring the public into her life.
One Hollywood star turned down the lead role in 3 films that became classics. Each time the same actor got his rejected parts and became a legend. Another Olympic champion chose cheap B movies over serious roles for 30 years. A third believed he was making masterpieces while creating films so bad they're still laughed at today. These weren't small mistakes. These were career-ending disasters by men who couldn't see what everyone else could. Their stories proved that in Hollywood stupidity paid better than you'd think. Johnny Weissmuller. Johnny Weissmuller was a man the world couldn't stop watching. Long before Hollywood turned him into Tarzan, he was a real-life hero in the water. In 1922, he shocked the world by swimming 100 m in just 58.6 seconds, the first man in history to break the 1-minute barrier. That one race changed everything. Over the next few years, he won 5 Olympic gold medals and broke 67 world records. People called him unstoppable, invincible. But the truth was far more complicated. When MGM offered him a film deal in the 1930s, he didn't see the trap. His acting career exploded with the first Tarzan movie in 1932. His wild yell, his muscular body, his swinging vines, all of it became iconic. But what most people didn't know was that Johnny couldn't read a full script. He had only made it through the 8th grade and struggled to understand anything beyond basic words. The studio knew it, so they gave him roles with grunts and simple lines, then locked him into that image. For 16 years, he played the Jungle Man over and over, 12 times in total. He became rich and famous, but never respected, never free. Behind the scenes it got worse. Johnny didn't understand money either. He trusted the wrong people. One of them was his business manager, who quietly stole most of his fortune through shady deals and fake investments. He had earned millions during his peak, but by the 1960s he was nearly broke. His 4th wife walked out, saying she wouldn't stay married to a poor ape man. The words cut deeper than any headline. She left, and so did everyone else. Then came the tragedy he never recovered from. In 1962, his daughter Heidi died in a car crash. She was pregnant. In one terrible moment, he lost his child and his unborn grandchild. After that, he was never the same. There was one moment that showed just how strange his life had become. In the late 1950s, during a visit to Cuba, rebels stopped his car and pointed guns at him. Johnny had nothing left to offer except one thing. He stood up, opened his mouth, and let out the famous Tarzan yell. The rebels froze. Then slowly, they lowered their weapons. They recognized the sound from their childhoods. And just like that, they let him go. Jayne Mansfield. She was blonde, curvy, and knew exactly how to use a camera. But behind Jayne Mansfield's dazzling smile was a woman playing a dangerous game, one that brought her fame, scandal, and ultimately a violent end. Jayne's rise began on the Broadway stage in 1955 when she played a sultry bombshell named Rita Marlowe in Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? Audiences couldn't look away. When the play turned into a movie in 1957, she brought that same explosive charm to the screen. But it was The Girl Can't Help It in 1956 that cemented her legend. While the film was meant to spotlight Jayne's sex appeal, it accidentally became one of the most iconic rock and roll films of all time. Then came Promises, Promises in 1963. That's where she shocked America. Jayne became the first mainstream Hollywood actress of the sound era to appear fully nude on screen. 3 nude scenes. 59 seconds of footage. And they didn't just show it once. Those scenes were repeated as dream sequences throughout the entire film. People thought she was just another blonde who got lucky. But Jayne Mansfield was playing a part. She once claimed her IQ was 163, genius level. She spoke 5 languages fluently: English, French, Spanish, German, and Italian. These weren't just lines she memorized. She used them in real life, on tours and in interviews across Europe and South America. But Hollywood didn't want a genius in a tight dress. They wanted a dumb blonde. So she gave them one. The saddest moment came when she sat across from Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. Carson wasn't buying the act. He pushed her, asking about her university grades and calling out the mismatch between her reputation and her intellect. "Nobody with an IQ of 160 can be that stupid," he told her. But Jane never broke character. She giggled, flirted, and acted like she didn't get the joke. Moment it was clear she had decided long ago that being taken seriously wasn't as valuable as being talked about. Jane's dumb blonde image wasn't just for TV. She used it in real life to stir headlines. In 1955 she dove into a pool in a bikini 2 sizes too small. It came off. Cameras clicked. Headlines followed. That stunt exposed herself at the Rio Carnival, at dinner parties, and once even upstaged Sophia Loren at a Hollywood banquet. That particular incident, Jane leaning forward at a table while Loren stared at her chest in disbelief, became a global sensation. But chasing attention came at a price. On June 29, 1967, Jane Mansfield was in a Buick Electra driving to New Orleans with her children asleep in the back seat. The car slammed into the back of a truck that had slowed due to pesticide fog sprayed by a city vehicle. The top of the car was nearly sliced off. Jane, just 34 years old, died instantly from massive head injuries. Rumors spread that she was decapitated, but they weren't true. Still, the crash was so horrific that it changed U.S. traffic laws. Today, the steel bars you see hanging from the backs of trucks, called Mansfield bars, exist because of that accident, a grim safety feature born from one of Hollywood's most brutal tragedies. George Raft. George Raft was once one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. In the 1930s, he became famous for playing gangsters on screen. His big break came in 1932 when he played a coin-flipping thug named Ronaldo in Scarface. The film was a hit, and Raft's cool style, black pinstripe suits, black shirts with white ties, quickly caught on. He wasn't just an actor, he was a fashion icon. By 1933, he was the highest-paid actor in Hollywood. He even left his handprints in cement at Grauman's Chinese Theater. By 1940, he starred alongside legends like Mae West in Night After Night, James Cagney in Each Dawn I Die, and Humphrey Bogart in They Drive By Night. But behind the fame and style was a series of terrible choices that ruined his career. The biggest shock wasn't how well he played gangsters, it was how many legendary roles he turned down. Roles that could have kept him a star for decades. The first major blow came in 1941. Raft was offered the lead in High Sierra, but he didn't like that the character dies at the end, so he said no. That role went to Humphrey Bogart, and it changed everything for him. Before that film, Bogart was stuck in B-movies. After High Sierra, he became a household name. What makes it worse, Raft had once saved Bogart's life during a film shoot. A runaway truck nearly crushed him, but Raft pulled him to safety. And then a few years later, he handed Bogart the role that launched his career, all because he couldn't stand the idea of dying on screen. Then came The Maltese Falcon. Another offer, another refusal. This time Raft didn't want to work with a new director named John Huston. He also didn't like that it was a remake. So again, Bogart got the part. The film became a classic. The studios saw what Bogart could do. And when it was time to cast Casablanca, they didn't even consider Raft. They went straight to Bogart because of The Maltese Falcon. Raft had, in a way, built the path for Bogart's stardom by simply saying no. But Raft's problems weren't just about bad choices. His personal life made things worse. He wasn't just acting like a gangster, he grew up with real ones. He was born in Hell's Kitchen, a rough part of New York. He ran with guys like Bugsy Siegel. He once hauled illegal alcohol for a gangster named Downey Madden, and his loyalty never wavered. When Siegel was on trial, Raft stood up for him in court. He was so closely tied to the mafia that by 1967, the British government wouldn't even let him enter the UK. These real-life connections made him great at playing tough guys, but they also scared producers. And Raft didn't help himself. He started turning down any role that made him look too much like a criminal, despite the fact that the public already saw him that way. In trying to protect his image, he pushed away the very roles that could have kept him relevant. He had the looks, he had the talent, he had the charm. But over and over, George Raft let fear, ego, and bad judgment get in the way. He wasn't destroyed by scandal or lack of skill. He was destroyed by his own decisions, each one closing a door that could have led to greatness. By the end, the man who once topped the box office was just another cautionary tale in Hollywood. Ed Wood. Ed Wood believed he was a genius. The world didn't agree. His most famous film, Plan 9 from Outer Space, came out in 1957. It was meant to be a thrilling mix of science fiction and horror. In it, aliens tried to stop humans from destroying the universe by raising the dead. Zombies were supposed to march on world capitals, but nothing in the film worked the way Ed planned. The story was strange, the effects were cheap, the acting felt stiff, and the editing looked rushed. He had called it Grave Robbers from Outer Space, but his investors hated the title. They thought it was offensive, so he changed it to Plan 9. People laughed at it not because it was funny but because it was terrible. Still, Ed stood by every frame. He didn't just think he was making good movies, he thought he was making great ones. That's what made his story so bizarre. He wasn't a con artist. He truly believed in what he was doing. And he didn't stop. Even after Plan 9 flopped, Ed kept filming. He moved from aliens and monsters to more shocking content. In the 1960s and 70s, he made sexploitation films like The Sinister Urge and Take It Out in Trade. Later, he went even further and made adult films with titles like Necromania. But no matter how low the budget or how wild the plot, Ed still saw himself as a serious artist. By the time he reached his 50s, things had fallen apart. He was broke, struggling with alcohol, and making movies nobody watched. In December 1978, just days after getting evicted, Ed Wood died of a heart attack. He was only 54. At that point, most people had already forgotten him. Then something strange happened. 2 years later, in 1980, a book gave him the title of Worst Director of All Time. It was meant as an insult, but instead of killing his name, it brought him back. People started watching his old films again, this time for fun. They found joy in the mistakes, the clumsy effects, the strange dialogue, the total seriousness behind the silliness. Ed Wood became a cult legend. Ironically, he became more famous dead than he ever was alive. Even his personal life had odd turns. In 1967, a 21-year-old woman showed up at his door. She claimed Ed was her father, born from a brief romance after his time as a Marine in World War II. Ed was shocked. His wife didn't believe it for a second. She threw the woman out, but others noticed the resemblance. The girl looked just like him. Clarence Buster Crabbe. In 1932, Clarence Buster Crabbe pulled off one of the most dramatic victories in swimming history. He won the 400-meter freestyle by just 1/10 of a second, beating the world record holder Jean Terrace of France. His final time, 4 minutes and 48.4 seconds, an Olympic record. He came from behind in the last 25 m, 2 lengths down at the halfway mark, and somehow he clawed his way to the front. America cheered. Hollywood noticed. That single race changed everything. Crabbe was suddenly a star. Within a few years, he became the face of Flash Gordon in 1936. Audiences loved him. He had the looks, the muscles, and the charisma. Studios gave him more, Buck Rogers, Tarzan. He was the only actor to play all 3 of the top pulp heroes of the 1930s. In the world of serials, he was king. But behind that glowing smile and silver screen armor was a man making strange choices. Instead of chasing serious roles or pushing his range as an actor, Crabbe stayed exactly where he was, safe, predictable. He stuck to the same kind of low-budget, action-packed serials that first made him famous. It wasn't about ambition. It was about comfort. And then came the offer that could have changed his career, High Noon in 1952, a real Western classic. A chance to act in something serious, something lasting. He turned it down. chose another cheap production instead. That decision defined him. Again and again, Crabbe picked the familiar path. It was steady work, easy scripts, no risk, but no growth either. He later admitted, with a strange mix of pride and regret, that he had only made one movie in his entire career. That's it. One. For someone who started out beating the best swimmer in the world, that felt like a quiet surrender. The disappointments didn't stop with film. After leaving Hollywood, Crabbe turned to business. He worked at Cascade Industries in New Jersey for decades, selling swimming pools. Then he tried to build his own pool company. It flopped. Mismanagement, overspending, no real planning. The same kind of business failure that ruined the finances of his old rival Johnny Weissmuller. Frank Fay had everything. In the 1920s, he was the highest-paid performer in vaudeville, making a staggering $17,500 a week. People called him the first true stand-up comedian. He didn't just tell jokes, he spoke casually, like he was chatting with you. That style would later inspire legends like Jack Benny. Studios loved him too. Warner Brothers gave him major film roles, and on Broadway, he originated the lead in Harvey in 1944. But none of it lasted. Behind the spotlight, Fay was unraveling. His marriage to actress Barbara Stanwyck became infamous for all the wrong reasons. He was violent, cruel, and drunk more often than not. One night, in a fit of rage, he threw their young son into a swimming pool. People in Hollywood whispered about it, but the story spread fast. Jokes began to circulate. One went, "The only one Fay can beat without getting knocked out is his wife." It wasn't funny. It was horrifying. That marriage, full of abuse and tragedy, is said to have inspired the 1937 film A Star is Born, a tale of a woman rising to fame while her husband falls apart. And Frank Fay fell hard. He wasn't just violent. He was openly hateful. He despised Jewish people and didn't hide it. Comedian Milton Berle once looked up to him, until Fay called him a little Jew bastard and demanded he be removed from backstage. Berle waited for him. When Fay turned his back, Berle smashed him in the face with a stage brace. It ripped his nose wide open. Fay never recovered from that physically or socially. After that night, most of the industry turned their backs on him. Then after World War II, Fay made a choice that finished him completely. In 1946, while the world was still grieving the Holocaust, he marched in rallies with fascist supporters. People were disgusted. He lost the chance to star in the film version of Harvey. That role went to James Stewart, who got an Oscar nomination. Fay's name was pulled from tables at famous spots like Lindy's. No one wanted him around, not even the people who once admired him. By the time he died in 1961, Frank Fay had no spotlight left. He had gone from a stage pioneer to a man people only spoke of in hushed tones. William Frawley. William Frawley is best remembered as Fred Mertz, the grumpy landlord on I Love Lucy. The show aired from 1951 to 1957 and became one of the most loved sitcoms in TV history. Frawley was already 64 when he got the role. By then, he had appeared in over 100 movies in a career that stretched across 35 years. But his film work was drying up. He wasn't a big star, just a familiar face. Later he found more success playing Bub on My Three Sons from 1960 to 1965. On screen, he was funny, grouchy, and dependable. Off-screen, things were much messier. Frawley had a drinking problem that everyone in Hollywood knew about. When Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz wanted to cast him, CBS executives didn't trust him. They were scared he'd show up drunk or cause chaos on set. Arnaz, who also drank heavily, gave Frawley one last chance. If he showed up late or drunk more than once, he'd be fired and blacklisted from the industry. Some say Arnaz gave him exactly 3 strikes. The first mess-up would be forgiven. The second would come with a warning. And the third would end his career. Shockingly, Frawley never showed up drunk. He didn't even miss a cue. He became one of Arnaz's closest friends and held up his end of the deal completely. But he wasn't as easy to work with when it came to Vivian Vance, the actress who played his wife Ethel. Their hatred for each other was the stuff of legend. When the show started, Frawley was 64 and Vance was 42. She hated the idea of playing wife to someone that much older and made no secret of it. She joked that nobody would believe she was married to that old coot. Frawley heard those insults and fought back. He pushed for cruel jokes in the script, calling her a sack full of doorknobs behind the scenes. Their feud got so bitter that when a co-star asked Frawley years later about working with Vance, he didn't hold back. At a lunch with a lieutenant general present, he said, "That miserable CT." The room went silent. Even his friends were stunned. This kind of behavior wasn't new for Frawley. In 1928, he punched fellow actor Clifton Webb during a Broadway production and got fired. That moment set the tone for the rest of his life. By the early 1950s, he was nearly unemployable. His drinking and foul temper had ruined his reputation. That's why he accepted Desi Arnaz's strict conditions. He had no other options. His time on My Three Sons showed how much he was slipping. In later seasons, he would sometimes fall asleep while filming. A prop man had to lie on the floor and tap his foot to keep him awake during close-ups. If he forgot a line, he'd yell, "Who writes this crap anyway?" to hide his mistake. Eventually, his health got so bad he failed the studio's insurance test. That was the end of the job. On March 3, 1966, William Frawley walked out of a movie theater on Hollywood Boulevard and collapsed. He died of a heart attack at age 79. There were no goodbyes, no grand tributes. The man who once made millions laugh died alone on the sidewalk. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis was born Bernard Schwartz on June 3, 1925. He didn't grow up in Hollywood glamour. His early life was hard, shaped by poverty and the tough streets of New York. But by the 1950s, he had become one of the most recognizable faces in American cinema. Audiences loved his charm, good looks, and energy. But beneath that polished image was a man whose career would later become one of Hollywood's biggest missed opportunities. By 1957, Curtis had done something few thought possible. He earned serious respect as a dramatic actor. His role in Sweet Smell of Success stunned critics. He played a shady press agent opposite Burt Lancaster, and proved he could do more than smile for the camera. That same sharp edge helped him land an Oscar nomination in The Defiant Ones the following year. He played a white prisoner chained to a black man played by Sidney Poitier. The film tackled race head-on, a bold move in 1958, and Curtis held his own. Then came Some Like It Hot in 1959. Directed by Billy Wilder, it wasn't just a comedy, it became a classic. The American Film Institute later ranked it as the funniest American movie of all time. Curtis starred alongside Marilyn Monroe and Jack Lemmon, and for once critics and audiences agreed. He was electric. He followed that hit with another one in Operation Petticoat, also in 1959. And in 1960, he had a role in Spartacus, the epic blockbuster where he played a Roman slave. For a few years, it seemed like Curtis could do anything: comedy, drama, action. He was everywhere. He wasn't just a star, he was a serious actor. But then something strange happened. Instead of building on his success, Curtis started picking weaker scripts. His choices puzzled critics. He didn't chase serious roles or continue pushing himself. He went from sharing the screen with legends to starring in forgettable films. It was as if he couldn't see what made him great in the first place. By the mid-1960s, his star power was fading fast. He made one last big swing in 1968 with The Boston Strangler. He played Albert DeSalvo, the real-life serial killer. It was dark, disturbing, and very different from anything he'd done before. Some critics said it was his best performance ever, but it also felt like a final act, his last great role in a major film. After that, Curtis drifted toward television. He starred in The Persuaders with Roger Moore, but it only lasted 24 episodes. He made appearances on other shows too. But the days of hit films were over. He had once gone toe-to-toe with Burt Lancaster. Now he was mostly a guest star. The saddest part isn't just that Curtis's career faded, it's how it faded. He had the talent. He had the range. He even had the critical praise. But he didn't protect his legacy. He didn't seem to understand what kind of roles made him special. Instead of building on his momentum, he let it slip away. Guy Madison. Guy Madison was once one of the most recognizable faces on television. From 1951 to 1958, he starred as Wild Bill Hickok in a hit Western show that aired across America. It ran for 6 years and was so popular that episodes were later stitched together into 17 different films. His face was everywhere, on cereal boxes, bubblegum cards, even toy guns. He became a cowboy hero for a generation of kids. But off-screen, the man behind the badge was spiraling. Underneath that perfect jawline and cowboy hat was someone making mistake after mistake, both in front of the camera and in his personal life. His journey into Hollywood wasn't planned. He was born as Robert Ozell Mosley in Bakersfield, California. During World War II, he served in the Navy. One weekend in 1944, while on leave, he went to a Lux Radio Theater broadcast in Hollywood. He wasn't there to get noticed, he just wanted to enjoy the show. But someone in the crowd did notice him. An assistant to talent agent Henry Wilson saw his face and flagged him. David O. Selznick needed a real-looking sailor for a small role in Since You Went Away, and Madison got the job. Just like that, he became Guy Madison, a name invented from a passing Dolly Madison cake wagon and the phrase, "The guy girls want to meet." He shot one scene and returned to the Navy. By the time he came back, the movie had come out and he had thousands of fan letters waiting for him, all from one short scene. It should have been the start of something huge. But there was a big problem: Madison couldn't act. Or at least, he never really tried to learn. When RKO signed him in 1946, they gave him lead roles in romantic films and dramas. But his performances were stiff, emotionless, and hard to watch. Critics noticed. Directors noticed. Even other actors noticed. But Madison didn't seem to care. He reportedly turned down acting classes and laughed off coaching. He once said, "Audiences want me, not some Shakespearean." That attitude kept him from ever becoming a serious movie star. He stayed famous, but only as a face, never as a talent. His personal life was just as troubled. He married actress Gail Russell, who suffered from extreme anxiety and alcoholism. At first, Madison tried to support her, but as her drinking worsened and her behavior became more unstable, the marriage crumbled. By the time his career was taking off on TV, their relationship was falling apart. They separated in 1953 and officially divorced in October 1954. The press had a field day with it. Instead of keeping a low profile, Madison shocked everyone by marrying actress Sheila Connolly just days after his divorce. They didn't even wait to do it in California. They rushed off to Juarez, Mexico, and got married in a quick civil ceremony. But none of that compared to the financial mess he created for himself. Despite earning huge money from Wild Bill Hickok, Madison made one of the worst decisions of his life: he bought a ranch. It turned out to be a financial disaster. By the 1960s, he was broke. To stay afloat, he took roles in cheap spaghetti westerns in Italy. And even in those, he looked like he didn't care. He was phoning it in, stuck in roles that paid the bills but killed his reputation. By then, the industry had moved on. The pretty face that once launched a fan mail frenzy had become a symbol of wasted potential. In the final years of his life, Madison suffered from emphysema, likely caused by years of heavy smoking. It left him weak and homebound. On February 6, 1996, he died in Palm Springs, California. He was 74.